Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
I sat at my childhood dining room table, staring at a $7,000 check and a one-way plane ticket to Portland. My parents beamed with forced smiles, while my golden child sister Emma recorded everything on her phone, coaching me to show gratitude for their generous gift to help their disappointing son start over somewhere else. What they did not know was that 3 hours ago, I received confirmation that my agricultural technology startup just sold for $9 million. I took the check, smiled back, and decided to let them keep believing their lie a little longer. The irony was not lost on me as I sat there holding that check. For the past 3 years, I had been working 18-hour days from my tiny studio apartment on the north side of Chicago, developing precision irrigation technology that could revolutionize small-scale farming. My system reduced water usage by 40%, while increasing crop yields by 25%. The prototype had been tested on 12 farms across Wisconsin and Illinois, delivering results that exceeded even my most optimistic projections. My parents, Helen and Marcus, owned a successful real estate development company in suburban Naperville. They specialized in converting farmland into shopping centers and residential subdivisions. The fact that their son was working to improve agriculture instead of destroy it seemed to escape their understanding entirely. Every family gathering for the past 3 years had followed the same script. When would I get a real job? Why was I wasting my education on farming gadgets? Did I realize I was 32 years old and still living like a college student? My sister Emma, 28, and their undisputed favorite, worked as a real estate agent for their company. She had inherited their talent for seeing dollar signs instead of potential. Tonight she sat across from me in her designer dress, holding her iPhone steady as she documented what she clearly expected to be my moment of grateful humiliation. The dinner had started like every other family gathering. Helen asked about my job search while serving her famous pot roast. Marcus suggested I consider applying for a position at their development firm, handling permits or coordinating with contractors. Emma chimed in with stories about her latest sales successes, making sure everyone understood she was the child who had made something of herself. But 3 weeks ago, everything changed for me. While helping my father fix a computer issue in his home office, I accidentally saw bank statements scattered across his desk. What I discovered made my stomach turn. Over the past 24 months, my parents had transferred $200,000 to Emma's boutique business. $200,000 to support her failing retail venture, while they claimed they could not spare $5,000 to help me file my patent applications. The betrayal cut deeper than any harsh word they had ever spoken. They had the money. They had always had the money. They simply did not believe in me enough to invest it. Emma's boutique, which sold overpriced accessories to suburban housewives, was worthy of their financial backing. My technology that could help feed the world was not. As we ate dinner, the conversation inevitably turned to my lack of progress in securing investors. My parents exchanged those knowing looks that had haunted my childhood, the silent communication between two people who agreed their son was a perpetual disappointment. Helen pushed the envelope across the table, with the ceremonial gravity of someone delivering a verdict. She explained that they had been discussing my situation and decided to help me start fresh somewhere new. Portland had a lower cost of living and a more entrepreneurial culture. Sometimes a man needed to know when to admit defeat and try something more realistic. The $7,000 would cover my moving expenses and provide a cushion while I looked for steady employment. Marcus nodded along, adding that this was tough love. They had enabled my unrealistic dreams for too long. It was time for me to face reality and build a conventional career like other men my age. Emma zoomed in on my face with her camera, whispering encouragement to show proper appreciation for their generosity. My phone buzzed against my leg. A text from my business partner Jake. Contracts are signed. $9.2 million. We did it, Roosevelt. We actually did it. Another message followed immediately. When do you want to announce? I have champagne ready. I kept my expression neutral, sliding the phone back into my pocket. My family continued their intervention, completely unaware that the man they were trying to exile had just become a multimillionaire. The timing was so perfect, it felt like divine intervention. Here they were, offering me charity because they believed I was a failure, while my phone contained proof that I had succeeded beyond their wildest imagination. I studied their faces as they outlined my supposed rehabilitation plan. These people who should have been my biggest supporters had watched me struggle for 3 years without offering real help. Now that they thought I was at rock bottom, they were finally willing to contribute a fraction of what they had given Emma without question. The weight of their conditional love settled on my shoulders like a familiar burden. They loved the version of me that existed in their minds, the son who would eventually give up his foolish dreams and join their practical world. They had never loved the real me, the man who saw solutions where they saw problems, who chose innovation over convention. I realized this dinner was not about helping me. It was about getting me out of their lives so they could stop feeling guilty about my apparent failure. The check and plane ticket were not gifts. They were bribes to make me disappear quietly. I excused myself to use the bathroom, needing a moment to process what was happening. As I walked down the hallway lined with family photos, I could hear my parents talking in hushed tones in the kitchen. Something in their voices made me stop and listen. "I still think we should wait until after he leaves for Portland," my mother was saying. "You know how sentimental he gets about that farm? The developers want to close by the end of next month," my father replied. "We cannot hold up the deal because Roosevelt might get emotional. Besides, he will probably be grateful for his share of the proceeds once he realizes how broke he really is." My blood turned to ice. They were talking about my grandfather's farm, the 160-acre property in Wisconsin where I had spent every summer of my childhood, learning about soil conditions and crop rotation from the man who had sparked my love of agriculture. The place where I had tested and perfected my irrigation system over the past 2 years. "Emma thinks we should not tell him until after the sale closes," Helen continued. "She says he will just make this about his grandfather and try to guilt us into keeping it." "Smart girl," Marcus said. "The shopping center will bring in steady income for years, much better investment than letting good land sit there growing corn." I pressed myself against the wall, struggling to breathe. My grandfather had died 2 years ago, leaving the farm to my parents with the understanding that it would stay in the family. He had made them promise to offer it to me first if they ever decided to sell, but promises meant nothing when there was money involved. The farm was not just sentimental to me. It was where I had developed my technology, working alongside 3 neighboring farmers who had agreed to test my systems. Their success with my irrigation equipment had been crucial in attracting the buyer who had just purchased my company. Without that farm, without those test results, none of this would have happened. Emma's voice joined the conversation. "I told the shopping center people that Roosevelt spends time out there, but they said they can handle any tenant issues. Once he moves to Portland, it will not matter anyway." Tenant issues. They were talking about me like I was some squatter they needed to evict. The farm where my grandfather had taught me to read soil conditions and understand weather patterns was just another development opportunity. The place where I had found my life's purpose was about to become a strip mall. I returned to the dining room on unsteady legs, watching my family with new eyes. They were not just failing to support my dreams, they were actively destroying the foundation of everything I had built. The farm sale would close next month, eliminating the test site that had proved my technology worked and pushing out the small farmers who had become my first customers. My phone showed 3 more messages from Jake about celebration plans and media interviews. Agricultural Weekly wanted to feature our story. The Department of Agriculture was interested in licensing deals for water conservation programs. Major investors were already calling about my next project, but none of that mattered compared to what I was discovering about my family. They had orchestrated this entire evening to make themselves look generous while solving their Roosevelt problem permanently. The check was conscience money. The plane ticket was a one-way exit from their lives. They wanted me gone before I could interfere with their profitable betrayal of everything my grandfather had stood for. Emma was still filming, treating my supposed humiliation as entertainment content for her social media followers. She had already announced on Instagram that she was documenting a family dinner where they were helping her struggling brother. The narrative was complete. Successful daughter supports generous parents in rescuing failed son. I watched her phone screen and realized she had been building this content for weeks. Photos of my grandfather's farm with captions about family memories. Pictures of her boutique with mentions of her brother's farming hobby. She had been setting up this story, positioning herself as the caring sister who tried to help her misguided brother find his way. The manipulation was breathtaking in its scope. They had planned this evening like a business presentation, with props and scripted dialogue and a predetermined outcome. I was not their son in this scenario. I was a problem they were solving with minimal cost and maximum public relations benefit. My grandfather would have been horrified to see what his children had become. He had built that farm with his own hands, transforming marshy wasteland into productive soil through decades of careful cultivation. He had taught me that farming was about patience and faith, about nurturing growth even when you could not see immediate results. Now his children were selling his life's work to build another shopping center, another monument to their philosophy, that everything worthwhile could be measured in quarterly profits. They were not just betraying me. They were betraying his memory and everything he had tried to teach us about the value of working with the land instead of against it. Dessert arrived with Helen's famous apple pie, but the sweetness tasted bitter in my mouth. Emma had switched to her front-facing camera, narrating the scene for her followers as she documented my supposed gratitude for their generous rescue package. "So, here we are at family dinner," she said with practiced social media enthusiasm. "And my parents just surprised my brother with the most amazing care package to help him start fresh in Portland. Sometimes you need family to step in and show tough love, you know?" She turned the camera toward me, prompting me to say something appreciative. I managed a weak smile and thanked them for their thoughtfulness, playing my assigned role in their scripted drama. Emma beamed with satisfaction, already editing the content in her mind for maximum engagement. But then, she started sharing stories about her networking efforts on my behalf. She had mentioned my farming gadget hobby to several clients over the past year, she explained to the camera. Some people chase impossible dreams, while others focus on proven business models, she said with a laugh that made my skin crawl. My blood ran cold, as Emma casually revealed she had encountered agricultural investors through her real estate connections. She had told them about my technology, she said proudly, but explained that it was more of a hobby project than a serious business venture. She wanted to protect me from embarrassment, she claimed, in case things did not work out. The room started spinning as I realized what she was telling me. 6 months ago, I had approached 3 venture capital firms that specialized in agricultural technology. All 3 had shown initial interest after reviewing my technical specifications and test data, but then their enthusiasm mysteriously evaporated. Follow-up calls went unreturned. Emails were ignored. I never understood what changed. Now, I knew. Emma had poisoned those relationships before they could develop. She had used her real estate connections to undermine my credibility, presenting my revolutionary technology as a hobby project from her unreliable brother. She had cost me critical early funding that could have accelerated my development timeline by months. I ran into Tom Bradley from Midwest Agri Ventures at the country club last month, she continued, still filming herself. He asked about Roosevelt's irrigation thing, and I told him you were still working on it but that the family was encouraging more realistic career options. I think he appreciated the honesty. Tom Bradley, the managing partner who had stopped returning my calls after an encouraging initial meeting. Emma had sabotaged that relationship too, painting me as a dreamer whose own family did not believe in his work. The betrayal was systematic and deliberate. Helen and Marcus laughed along with Emma's stories, treating my business efforts as family entertainment. They shared anecdotes about explaining my farming phase to their social circle, always emphasizing how they had tried to guide me toward more practical pursuits. My mother mentioned telling their neighbors that I would outgrow my agricultural interests once I faced financial reality. I excused myself again, stepping onto the back porch where the cool October air helped clear my head. I called Jake, who answered on the first ring with barely contained excitement. "Roosevelt, please tell me you are ready to celebrate. I have been sitting on this news for 3 hours and I am about to explode. Hold off on any announcements for now. I said quietly, watching my family through the porch door. I have some family business to handle first. Family business? Roosevelt, we just sold our company for $9.2 million. Your share alone is more than most people see in a lifetime. What family business could be more important than celebrating the biggest achievement of our lives? Through the glass, I could see my parents leaning close together, talking animatedly about something. Emma had put down her phone and was joining their conversation, all three of them laughing about something hilarious. I will explain later, I told Jake. Just trust me on this. No press releases, no social media, no announcements, until I give you the word. You are scaring me, man. Is everything okay? Everything was not okay. Everything was the opposite of okay. But I could not explain that to Jake without sounding insane. How do you tell your business partner that your family has spent years systematically undermining your success while presenting themselves as loving supporters? I hung up and moved closer to the door, straining to hear their conversation. What I heard made my chest tighten with anger. I am just relieved we finally pushed him to make a decision, my father was saying. Having him around these family dinners always creates tension because of his unrealistic expectations. The Portland move will let us focus on supporting Emma's expansion without Roosevelt constantly asking for financial help, my mother added. We can have normal family gatherings again. Emma nodded enthusiastically. And I can stop pretending his farming thing might actually work. It was getting harder to sound supportive when clients asked about it. They viewed me as a burden, not just a disappointment, but an active source of stress that they were finally eliminating. The check and plane ticket were not generous gifts. They were payment to make me disappear from their lives permanently. I returned to the dining room as Emma was showing my parents footage from earlier in the evening, laughing about my shocked expression when they presented their envelope. She was already editing highlights for her Instagram story, planning to portray the evening as heartwarming family support for a struggling relative. The cruelty was complete. They were not just rejecting me. They were monetizing my humiliation for public consumption, turning my supposed failure into content that would generate likes and comments from people who admired their generosity. I sat back down at the table, looking at these three people who shared my DNA but understood nothing about who I really was. They had created an elaborate fiction where I was the family failure, and they were the patient supporters finally offering tough love. In their story, I would gratefully accept their charity and disappear to Portland, where I would eventually thank them for forcing me to abandon my unrealistic dreams. But they had written their script without knowing the real plot. In a few minutes, I was going to reveal that their disappointing son had just achieved something none of them could have imagined. The farmer gadget hobby they mocked had generated more wealth than their real estate company earned in 5 years. The question was not whether to tell them. The question was how much I wanted them to suffer before I did. My phone rang just as Helen was cutting me another slice of pie I did not want. The caller ID showed my grandfather's lawyer, returning an earlier voicemail I had left about rumors regarding the farm sale. I stepped back onto the porch to take the call, my heart already racing. Roosevelt, I am glad you called, Attorney Mitchell Hartwell said without preamble. I have been trying to reach your parents about some irregularities with the farm property, but they have not returned my calls. What kind of irregularities? Well, according to county records, the property has been used as collateral for a substantial business loan. The problem is that your grandfather's will specifically stated that if the family ever decided to sell, you should be given first option to purchase at market value. Using it as loan collateral without your knowledge violates those terms. The porch started tilting under my feet. How much of a loan? $300,000, taken out 18 months ago. The borrower is listed as Emma's boutique business, but your parents signed as guarantors using the farm as security. $300,000. Emma's boutique expansion had not been funded by my parents' generosity. It had been funded by my inheritance, stolen through legal manipulation I had never been told about. They had used my grandfather's farm, my connection to the land that inspired my career, as collateral for my sister's failing business venture. There is more, Hartwell continued. If the boutique business defaults on the loan payments, which according to my sources is becoming increasingly likely, the bank can foreclose on the farm within 6 months. Your grandfather specifically wrote his will to prevent this kind of situation. I gripped the porch railing, struggling to process this information. My family had not just planned to sell the farm without telling me. They had already gambled it away on Emma's retail fantasy. If her 3 new store locations failed to generate enough revenue, the bank would seize the property that had been in our family for 60 years. What are my legal options? Given that you were never notified about the collateral arrangement and that it violates the will's explicit terms, you have grounds for a lawsuit that could void the loan entirely. But that would probably destroy your family relationships permanently. Family relationships. I looked through the porch door at my parents and Emma, still laughing over her phone footage of my humiliation. What relationships were left to destroy? I need to think about this, I told Hartwell. Can you send me copies of all the relevant documents? Already in your email. Roosevelt, I liked your grandfather very much. He would not want his legacy used to prop up a failing business while his favorite grandchild gets pushed out of the family. I hung up and stared at my phone screen, watching emails arrive with attachments that documented my family's betrayal in legal language. Bank statements showing the loan payments Emma had been missing. Property assessments that revealed how much the farm was really worth. Correspondence between my parents and developers who wanted to buy the land for commercial development. The picture was complete now. Emma's boutique expansion was failing, just like her original store. The loan payments were 3 months behind. My parents faced a choice between using their own money to bail her out or losing the farm to foreclosure. Their solution was to sell the property to developers before the bank could seize it, splitting the proceeds 3 ways while giving me a token payment to stay quiet and disappear. The $7,000 check on the dining room table represented less than 2% of what the farm was worth. They were stealing my inheritance, gambling my grandfather's legacy, and paying me grocery money to go away quietly. I pulled up Jake's messages about the company sale. $9.2 million. Patent licensing deals worth millions more over the next 5 years. A position with the acquiring company that included stock options potentially worth tens of millions if their agricultural technology division succeeded. The irony was overwhelming. While my family plotted to steal my inheritance and exile me for being a failure, I had quietly built something that would revolutionize American agriculture. My precision irrigation systems would be deployed across 3,000 farms within 2 years. The water conservation impact alone would save millions of gallons annually while increasing food production efficiency. I looked back through the porch door at Emma, still filming herself for social media. She was planning to post about supporting her struggling brother, building her personal brand as a caring family member while actively working to destroy everything I had built. The manipulation was breathtaking. My parents were visible in the kitchen, probably planning how to break the news about the farm sale once I was safely in Portland. They would present it as a difficult but necessary decision, offering me a small share of the proceeds as additional evidence of their generosity. They would never mention the loan or the fact that they had illegally used my inheritance as collateral. I made my decision. These people had systematically betrayed me while presenting themselves as loving family members. They had stolen my inheritance, sabotaged my business relationships, and planned to exile me based on their assumption that I was a failure. Now they were going to learn exactly who I really was. But I would not just tell them. I would let them dig their hole deeper first. I wanted them to fully commit to their current narrative before I revealed the truth. The satisfaction would be worth enduring a few more minutes of their cruelty. I walked back inside and asked Emma to make sure she was recording everything. She beamed at the suggestion, excited to capture more content of her grateful brother accepting their charity. I smiled genuinely for the first time all evening, knowing what was about to happen. They had written themselves into a story where they were the generous benefactors, and I was the grateful recipient of their wisdom. In a few minutes, I was going to show them the real ending to this story. I sat back down at the dining room table and looked directly into Emma's camera. The red recording light blinked steadily as I cleared my throat and smiled. "Thank you all for this incredibly generous offer," I began, my voice calm and measured. Before I accept, though, I have some news I would like to share with the family. I pulled out my phone and opened the email from Jake containing our acquisition agreement. Emma zoomed in slightly, expecting me to show them my meager bank balance or perhaps a rejection letter from another investor. Instead, I began reading aloud from the contract. Agreement for the acquisition of Roosevelt Agricultural Technologies by Midwest Innovation Corp. For a total purchase price of $9.2 million, with Roosevelt Miller retaining a 15% equity stake in the acquiring company's agricultural division. The room fell silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. Emma's camera wavered as her hands began shaking. Helen dropped her coffee cup, which shattered against her plate with a sound like gunfire. I continued reading the key terms. The technology licensing deals already in place with the Department of Agriculture. My new position as Chief Innovation Officer, with a starting salary of $400,000 annually. The stock options that vested over 5 years, potentially worth tens of millions if the agricultural division met its growth targets. Marcus began calculating numbers in his head, his face growing pale as he realized the magnitude of what he was hearing. Emma had stopped recording entirely, staring at me with her mouth open as if I had just announced I was from Mars. The buyer is particularly excited about our water conservation impact projections, I continued conversationally. Our systems have demonstrated 40% water usage reduction across 12 test sites, while increasing crop yields by an average of 25%. They estimate deployment across 3,000 farm partnerships within 18 months. Helen found her voice first. Roosevelt, is this some kind of joke? I turned my phone screen toward her, showing the signature page with both company logos and today's date. The contracts were finalized 3 hours ago. Jake is probably wondering why I have not called him back to start celebrating. The power dynamic in the room shifted so dramatically, I could almost feel the air pressure change. Suddenly, I was not the struggling family disappointment accepting their charity. I was the most successful person at the table, speaking from a position of absolute financial and professional strength. Emma fumbled with her phone, trying to delete the footage she had just recorded. Roosevelt, I had no idea. Why did not you tell us you were so close to a deal? When would I have told you? I asked mildly. During one of our family dinners where you spent the evening explaining why my farming gadgets would never amount to anything? Or maybe during one of your conversations with agricultural investors where you told them my work was just a hobby project? The color drained from Emma's face as she realized what I had just said. She had documented those conversations on social media, proudly sharing how she had protected me from embarrassment by managing investor expectations. Now those posts looked like evidence of deliberate sabotage. I addressed each of their lies systematically, my voice never rising above conversational level. I thanked Emma for her interference with the early investors, explaining how the delay had actually helped me improve the technology and secure a much larger deal. I mentioned having documentation from the investors themselves, who had apologized once they learned the full story about her misrepresentations. Tom Bradley, from Midwest Agri Ventures, was particularly apologetic, I said, watching Emma's face go white. He explained that family members sometimes do not understand technical innovations, but he wished he had spoken to me directly instead of taking your assessment at face value. I turned to my parents and brought up the farm situation, watching them exchange panicked glances as they realized I knew about their illegal maneuvering. I calmly explained my conversation with Attorney Hartwell and my knowledge of their use of my inheritance as collateral for Emma's failing business. Using inherited property as loan security without beneficiary consent violates federal trust laws, I said matter-of-factly. The penalties include both criminal charges and civil liability for the full value of the property. Marcus started to speak, but I held up a hand to stop him. The good news is that my new financial position allows me to solve this problem easily. I can buy the farm directly from the bank, paying off your fraudulent loan while preserving grandfather's legacy. I will convert it into a working demonstration site for agricultural technology, honoring the man who inspired my career. The transformation was complete. I was no longer sitting at their table as a supplicant hoping for approval. They were sitting at my table, realizing they had systematically betrayed someone who now possessed the resources to destroy them legally and financially if he chose to do so. I explained how their treatment had actually helped shape my success. Their constant criticism had taught me resilience. Their refusal to provide financial support had forced me to bootstrap my company, maintaining full ownership through the acquisition. Their emotional distance had motivated me to seek validation through achievement rather than family approval. In a way, I should thank you, I said with genuine warmth. Your belief that I would never amount to anything pushed me to prove you wrong in ways I never could have imagined. Emma tried to restart her recording, but I shook my head. Everything you filmed tonight now represents false documentation of your generous support for a $9 million startup acquisition. If you post any of it, you will be publicly claiming credit for supporting breakthrough agricultural technology. That would invite scrutiny of your actual contributions, which might be awkward given the documented evidence of your sabotage efforts. The silence stretched for long minutes as they processed the complete reversal of everything they thought they understood. I was not angry or vindictive. I was calm, factual, and utterly in control. The disappointing son they had been trying to exile was now in a position to buy and sell their entire business without affecting his monthly budget. I stood up and straightened my jacket, preparing to leave. Thank you again for the generous offer, but I will not be moving to Portland after all. My new position requires me to work from the company's downtown Chicago headquarters. I will be staying in the area indefinitely. Helen broke the stunned silence first, her voice shaking as she scrambled to rewrite the evening's narrative. Roosevelt, honey, I think there has been a misunderstanding. We have always believed in your potential. This dinner was meant to show family support during your transition, not push you away. She reached across the table, as if to take my hand, her eyes filled with tears that seemed genuine. We were just trying to provide encouragement and financial assistance. We wanted to help you succeed, not make you feel bad about your situation. Marcus nodded eagerly, jumping on the revisionist bandwagon with desperate enthusiasm. Absolutely. The Portland suggestion was about expanding your business opportunities in a growing technology market. We thought a change of scenery might help you network with other innovators and entrepreneurs. Emma joined the frantic backtracking, deleting more footage from her phone while talking rapidly. Roosevelt, I think you misunderstood my conversations with those investors. I was trying to generate interest in your work, not discourage them. Maybe my comments were taken out of context or something got lost in translation. I watched their panicked revisionism with the detached interest of a scientist observing predictable behavior. They were rewriting history in real time, transforming their systematic cruelty into misunderstood gestures of love and support. The speed of their transformation would have been impressive if it were not so pathetic. Let me help you understand what actually happened, I said, pulling out my phone to access the documentation I had been gathering for months. I have text messages between the two of you from last week discussing your relief at finally getting me out of town. Would you like me to read them aloud? Helen's face crumpled as she realized I had evidence of their private conversations. Roosevelt, you have to understand that parents sometimes say things in frustration that they do not really mean. We love you, and we have always wanted what is best for you. I scrolled through my phone and began reading their actual words. Messages about how my presence at family gatherings created tension. Discussions about focusing on Emma's business without my constant requests for financial help. Plans to present the Portland move as generous support rather than exile. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. I had not gathered it vindictively, but rather with the methodical approach I brought to all problems. When my family's behavior toward me became consistently hostile, I had started documenting it the same way I documented everything else in my professional life. I also have voicemail recordings from 3 different agricultural investors describing Emma's specific comments about my technology, I continued. Tom Bradley saved the message where she told him I was pursuing unrealistic dreams and that the family was encouraging more practical career choices. Would you like to hear that one? Emma became increasingly frantic, deleting files and photos from her phone while insisting everything had been a misunderstanding. Roosevelt, You are taking isolated comments out of context. I have always been supportive of your interests, even when other people thought they were impractical. But her current behavior betrayed her words. Instead of celebrating my success, she was desperately trying to eliminate evidence of her sabotage efforts. A truly supportive sister would have been thrilled to learn about my achievement. Emma was terrified about what my success meant for her carefully constructed public image. Marcus tried a different approach, becoming angry and defensive rather than apologetic. Roosevelt, regardless of any misunderstandings about communication, you cannot deny that we raised you and supported you through college. This attitude of yours is extremely ungrateful considering everything we have done for you over the years. I pulled out the financial records I had requested from my bank earlier that week. Actually, let me clarify something about financial support. According to these records, I have not asked you for money at any point during the past 3 years while building my company. Every dollar came from my part-time consulting work and small business loans I secured personally. The records showed deposits from agricultural consulting contracts I had taken on weekends and evenings to fund my startup development. Equipment purchases made with credit cards I paid off through freelance work. Patent filing fees covered by selling my car and riding the train to save money. Your refusal to help was irrelevant because I never needed your money, I continued. I needed your belief in my abilities. I needed you to stop telling investors that my work was a hobby. I needed you to not steal my inheritance to fund Emma's failing business ventures. The confrontation reached its emotional peak as I laid out the deeper truth about their systematic betrayal. This was not about financial support or career advice. It was about a family that had actively worked to undermine one of their own while presenting themselves as loving supporters. Helen's tears intensified as she began to grasp the full scope of their behavior. Roosevelt, we made mistakes. We said things we should not have said. But we are still your family, and family should be able to forgive each other and move forward. Family members should support each other's dreams, not sabotage them, I replied. Family members should celebrate each other's successes, not try to eliminate evidence that they oppose them. Family members should not steal from each other and then offer token payments to buy silence. Marcus sat quietly, finally understanding that their actions had consequences beyond simple apologies. Emma continued deflecting responsibility, but her argument sounded increasingly hollow against the mountain of documented evidence I had accumulated. I revealed my real test for them by pulling out the $7,000 check they had given me. I want you to know that I am donating this to a scholarship fund for agricultural students at grandfather's alma mater. I am also keeping the plane ticket as a reminder of what you really thought of me when you believed I was struggling. The symbolism was deliberate and cutting. They had offered me charity when they thought I was poor and desperate. Now that they knew I was successful and financially secure, they wanted to claim credit for supporting me. Their love was entirely conditional on circumstances that benefited them. The truth is that you have lost me permanently, I said without anger or bitterness, just stating a fact. Not because I am vindictive or unforgiving, but because you have shown me exactly who you are when you think I cannot fight back. When you thought I needed help, you offered exile. When you learned I was successful, you demanded inclusion. That is not love, that is opportunism. The room fell silent as they realized the finality of what I was saying. This was not a fight we would resolve with apologies and promises to do better. This was the end of our relationship as they had known it, transformed permanently by their choices and my success. They had written a story where they were generous parents helping their struggling son. Instead, they had created a story where they were exposed as manipulative opportunists who lost their most successful child through their own cruelty and short-sightedness. I concluded the evening by setting clear boundaries that would govern our relationship going forward. I would maintain polite contact for major holidays and family events, but everything had fundamentally changed between us. I was no longer seeking their approval or acceptance. I had moved beyond needing their validation for my life choices. From now on, we will interact as adults, with separate lives and different priorities, I explained calmly. I will send Christmas cards and attend weddings, but I will not pretend that nothing has changed or that your behavior tonight was acceptable family communication. I outlined my plans for grandfather's farm, which would become the Roosevelt Agricultural Innovation Center within 6 months. The facility would provide free technology training for small farmers across the Midwest, offering workshops on water conservation, soil management, and sustainable farming practices. The center would honor my grandfather's memory while advancing the agricultural principles he had taught me during those childhood summers. Grandfather believed that farming was about nurturing growth and sustaining life, I said, looking around the table at their stunned faces. He taught me that real success comes from helping things flourish, whether they are crops or communities or innovative ideas. This center will carry forward his legacy in ways that actually matter. I addressed each family member individually with my final thoughts. I told Helen that parents should believe in their children's dreams even when they do not understand them, and that conditional love, based on conventional success metrics, was not love at all. Real parenting meant supporting your children's authentic interests and celebrating their achievements, not sabotaging their efforts and then claiming credit for their eventual success. I told Marcus that success could not be measured solely by conventional financial metrics, and that true family support meant more than writing checks after someone had already proved themselves. A father's job was to build his children's confidence and help them pursue meaningful work, not tear them down, and then offer charity when their so-called practical advice proved wrong. I saved my most pointed comments for Emma, explaining that sibling relationships should be built on mutual support and genuine celebration of each other's achievements. True confidence did not require diminishing others' accomplishments or sabotaging their professional relationships. Real success meant building something meaningful, not just appearing successful on social media. Your social media presence is built on appearing generous and supportive, I told her directly. But your actual behavior contradicts every image you project online. That kind of disconnect between public persona and private actions eventually destroys credibility in ways that no amount of content creation can repair. I reflected on the broader lessons I had learned through this painful experience. Family relationships require mutual respect and genuine support, not just biological connection or shared history. Success means nothing if it is only acknowledged after external validation proves its worth beyond doubt. Real strength comes from pursuing your passion despite opposition, not because of approval from people who do not understand or support your vision. The most meaningful achievements often emerge from following unconventional paths that others dismiss or actively discourage. My grandfather taught me that farming requires patience and faith, I continued. You plant seeds without knowing exactly what will grow, but you tend them carefully because you believe in the possibility of harvest. Building a technology company follows the same principles. You work towards solutions that others cannot yet see, trusting that persistence and innovation will eventually yield results. I discussed how my agricultural technology work connected to larger themes about environmental stewardship and food security. My irrigation systems would help thousands of farming families reduce water consumption while maintaining productive yields. The technology addressed critical challenges around sustainable agriculture and climate adaptation that would only become more important in coming decades. Real success means creating value that extends beyond personal financial gain, I explained. My grandfather's farm will become a place where other innovators can develop solutions to agricultural challenges. The center will generate jobs and economic opportunities in rural communities, while advancing sustainable farming practices that benefit everyone. I announced my intention to establish additional innovation centers in farming communities across the Midwest over the next 5 years. Each facility would provide technology training, business development support, and research opportunities for agricultural entrepreneurs. The centers would create economic anchors in rural areas, while fostering the kind of innovation that could revitalize American agriculture. The evening ended with me collecting my jacket and keys from the front hallway. I returned to the dining room and placed the $7,000 check on the table, next to a handwritten note designating it for the Agricultural Scholarship Fund at Grandfather's University. I kept the plane ticket, sliding it into my wallet next to the faded photo of my grandfather and me standing in his cornfield during my last summer visit. Tomorrow I start a new chapter where my professional success aligns with my personal values, I said, looking around the table one final time. I will be working with people who understand the importance of sustainable agriculture and environmental innovation. My real family consists of farmers, scientists, and entrepreneurs who share a commitment to solving meaningful problems rather than just generating profit. As I walked toward the door, I reflected on the complete transformation of our family dynamic. I had begun the evening as their disappointing son and was ending it as their most successful family member. More importantly, I had discovered that external validation from family members was not necessary for personal fulfillment when you were confident in your values and abilities. My phone buzzed with celebration messages from Jake and my new colleagues at Midwest Innovation Corp. Tomorrow would bring press interviews, investor meetings, and strategic planning sessions for expanding our agricultural technology across thousands of farm partnerships nationwide. My real community was waiting to celebrate achievements that would benefit farming families and contribute to environmental sustainability. I stepped outside into the cool October air and looked back at my childhood home one last time. The lights in the dining room windows revealed 3 silhouettes still sitting around the table, probably trying to process what had just happened to their carefully constructed family narrative. Tomorrow, I would begin working from my new downtown Chicago office, leading an agricultural technology division with the resources to revolutionize American farming. I would honor my grandfather's legacy by converting his farm into an innovation center that would train the next generation of agricultural entrepreneurs. I would build partnerships with farming communities across the region, creating economic opportunities while advancing sustainable practices. The disappointment daughter they had tried to exile was now an agricultural technology pioneer, proving that sometimes the greatest victories come not from changing other people's minds, but from succeeding beyond their imagination while staying true to your authentic values and vision. As I drove through the quiet suburban streets toward my apartment, I realized that seeking approval from people who do not understand or support your dreams is ultimately futile. True success comes from pursuing meaningful work that aligns with your deepest values, regardless of others' opinions or expectations. My agricultural technology would help thousands of farmers while honoring the man who had taught me to see potential where others saw problems. The farm that my parents had tried to sell would become a place where innovation flourished and agricultural traditions evolved for the 21st century. My grandfather's legacy would live on through technology that helped farmers work more efficiently while protecting the environment he had loved so deeply. I had learned that family relationships built on conditional love and shared assumptions eventually reveal their true nature under pressure. When people think you need them, they show you one face. When they realize you have succeeded beyond their expectations, they show you another. Neither face represents authentic love or genuine support. Real success meant building something meaningful that would outlast personal relationships and family drama. My irrigation technology would continue helping farmers long after tonight's confrontation faded into memory. The innovation centers would train agricultural entrepreneurs for decades to come. The environmental benefits would contribute to sustainable farming practices that future generations would inherit. Most importantly, I had discovered that the greatest freedom comes from no longer needing approval from people who have never understood your dreams or supported your authentic interests. My worth was not determined by my family's opinion of my choices. My success was not diminished by their failure to recognize or celebrate my achievements. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter where my work aligned with my values, where my colleagues shared my commitment to innovation and sustainability, and where my success would be measured by the positive impact I created, rather than the approval I received from people who had never believed in my potential. I want to know what you think about family relationships and conditional love. Have you ever experienced a situation where family members supported you only after you proved yourself successful? How do you handle relationships with people who love the idea of you more than they love the real you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And do not forget to like this video if it resonated with your own experiences. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges and pursuing your authentic dreams despite opposition. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that their worth is not determined by other people's approval or understanding. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it inspires you to keep pursuing meaningful work that aligns with your deepest values, regardless of who believes in your vision.